Hi and welcome to my podcast. This is the first time I do it in English. And today's episode, number 12, will talk about why internet e-commerce is not working properly. The more exceptions we have and the more all the processes are integrated, the more problem everybody will get. So this is what this program is about, and here let my AI colleagues explain what this is about. Thank you.
So, in Sweden, there's this really wonderful idiom for when everything's just perfectly fine.
Right.
It's there's no cow on the ice.
Which is an amazing visual, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, a cow slipping around on a frozen lake is clearly an urgent crisis. So, if the ice is clear, you can relax. But for you, the listener joining us today, I have to warn you right up front.
Yeah, the ice is definitely not clear today.
No, not at all. In today's deep dive, there is a massive, completely unavoidable cow on the ice.
A very digital cow.
Exactly. The ice is the entire global digital e-commerce system. And the structural flaw we're looking at is, well, it's quietly erasing over 50 real-world territories from the digital map.
Yeah, and it's a systemic failure operating entirely in the background. I mean, if you live in one of these affected areas, the internet essentially gaslights you into believing your hometown just doesn't exist.
Which is wild to think about. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore how a tiny, really beautiful archipelago in the Baltic Sea called Åland has basically accidentally exposed this critical flaw in global digital commerce.
Right. They've become the ultimate test case.
Yeah. We're going to unpack how the rigid logic of the digital world is breaking physical realities and, how a proposed new protocol called the Territorial Logic Layer, or TLL, could actually fix this.
And we should clarify, we're not just talking about physical e-commerce here.
No, definitely not. We're doing a full review of what TLL means for e-commerce, and especially for all these areas today that operate under some kind of legal exception, or worse, just completely lack digital services in their own native language.
Which is a huge issue. But to understand the cure, we really have to look closely at the disease first.
Right, let's dive into that.
And the symptoms start with this bizarre clash between physical legal frameworks and digital code.
Yeah, because the situation in Åland is like the ultimate edge case. Legally and physically, trade works perfectly fine there.
It does.
I mean, Åland is part of the European Union's customs union, but they are outside of the EU's VAT union. It's a legally correct, fully functioning system.
Exactly.
If you ship a physical box of goods there, it just operates as an export from the EU. There's a 0% VAT applied at the point of sale, and then local import taxes are collected when it arrives.
It's totally standard physical trade logic.
Right. So let's unpack this. If the law is completely settled, why does this totally fall apart the second someone tries to buy, a pair of shoes online?
Because the code powering those online systems simply cannot handle Åland's nuanced legal status.
It's too rigid.
Exactly. Modern e-commerce relies on strict binary rules. In the architecture of the internet, Åland uses the ISO standard country code AX.
Okay.
And that code tells the database that Åland is its own distinct territory.
But the e-commerce platforms, they don't know what to do with AX, do they?
No, they completely freeze up. Trade to Åland isn't being stopped by a physical customs guard holding a clipboard. It is literally being stopped by the address field on a website.
That is just so crazy to me. It's an invisible wall.
It really is. A customer types their address, the system reads AX, and the API just fails. It doesn't fit into the predefined back-end logic of EU or non-EU.
So it's like, okay, imagine having a VIP pass to an exclusive club.
Okay, I like this.
Right. But the bouncer at the door is a robot that only knows how to scan standard general admission tickets.
Yes, exactly.
Your VIP pass is completely legal. The club management issued it to you personally. But if the barcode doesn't perfectly match the robot's specific programming, you are just locked out.
The robot bouncer completely lacks the capacity for context. And, the fallout from this data void is actually staggering.
Oh, so?
Well, the sources note that because of this system failure, Åland hasn't had accurate statistics on imports and exports across its tax border since 2017.
Wait, really? Since 2017?
Yeah, the data is just gone or completely mangled.
I need to understand the nuts and bolts of that. How does an entire economy just lose its macroeconomic trade data? It's not like the trucks aren't crossing the physical border.
The trucks are definitely crossing, but the data isn't tracking them properly. The European automated transit systems require these specific digital codes called movement reference numbers.
Okay, MRNs.
Right, MRNs. When a package enters the network, an MRN is generated to track its tax and customs status. But because the underlying system can't reconcile that AX code with the dual customs and VAT status,
The system just breaks.
yeah, those MRNs are either generated incorrectly or not at all. So if a digital system lacks an MRN, the physical truck might hit a logistics terminal and the boom barrier literally stays down.
Because the barcode scans as invalid.
Exactly. So trade either happens informally or gets logged under incorrect country codes, which completely destroys the actual statistical data.
But I mean, Shopify and Stripe are multi-billion-dollar tech giants. Are you telling me they can't just hire an engineer for an afternoon to add a custom drop-down menu for Åland?
It sounds simple, but it's not a user interface problem. It is a massive back-end logic cascade. E-commerce platforms don't operate in a vacuum, A single checkout process triggers API calls to a dozen different third-party services instantly.
Oh, right, because they're all interconnected.
Yeah. You have address validation through Loclate, tax calculation through an engine like Avalara, payment processing through Stripe, and then shipping label generation through DHL or UPS.
Wow, okay.
So adding AX to a drop-down menu doesn't fix the fact that those downstream APIs have completely conflicting rules about what AX actually means.
So if one service thinks AX means Finland, and another thinks it means a non-EU export, the whole chain collapses.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that historically, when global trade was mostly handled by humans with paperwork, the system tolerated exceptions.
Because humans have context.
Exactly. A customs agent could look at a package going to Åland, recognize the special status, apply the correct rules, and just wave it through.
But today, e-commerce systems are fully automated. There is zero tolerance for exceptions in an API call. It either validates or it returns a 404 error.
Let's break down exactly how this failure happens for that customer we mentioned earlier, the one trying to buy those shoes online.
Yes, the sources outline a pretty brutal four-step system collapse, right?
They do. It begins at step 0 with the address database itself. The system queries an address validation API, misclassifies the AX code, and automatically puts the user in the wrong VAT zone.
Which triggers step 1, the checkout cart.
Oh.
The platform looks at the API response and just throws up a generic error message saying, "We don't deliver to this region."
Order stopped right there.
But let's assume the buyer is savvy, and finds a workaround to get past that.
Right. They get to step 2, which is payment. And here, the payment gateway applies the wrong VAT. Åland shares a zip code structure with Finland, using postal codes like 2100.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the API reads the zip code, completely ignores the AX country code, assumes the buyer is in mainland Finland, and charges the standard Finnish VAT at checkout.
But wait, Åland is outside the VAT union. So theoretically, they get charged Finnish VAT by the algorithm and then get hit with their local import VAT again when the physical package actually arrives at the border.
Yes, they are literally being double taxed because of a zip code conflict.
That is infuriating.
And even if you just accept the double taxation, you still have to survive. Step 3, logistics. The delivery gets blocked in transit because the export logic required to move a box out of the EU VAT zone physically doesn't match the digital paperwork.
The paperwork generated by the payment gateway.
Exactly. So the shipment often gets routed through mainland Finland unnecessarily, adding days of delay and massive extra costs instead of just shipping directly to the island.
Which brings us to this major upcoming shift mentioned in our sources, ViDA, or VAT in the digital age. This is a massive European initiative pushing for real-time, AI-based, fully automated compliance for all digital trade.
Right, and ViDA relies on highly rigid data models to eliminate tax fraud and streamline cross-border trade. It wants real-time reporting of every single transaction.
But I feel like AI is going to make this worse.
It absolutely does. The mechanism at play here is that AI compliance models are trained on standard data sets. They look for patterns that fit the norm.
And an edge case like Åland looks to an algorithm like an anomaly or even fraud.
Exactly. It looks like an error that needs to be blocked.
So the tragic irony is that the more correct and strict the global digital infrastructure becomes under ViDA, the more broken the economy gets for these exception territories.
The code literally lacks the vocabulary to describe their reality.
Which means passing a new law or changing the physical borders wouldn't solve anything anyway. The physical world is already correct.
Right. We have to rewrite the digital protocol so that the different databases can actually understand each other.
And that brings us to the proposed solution, the territorial logic layer, or TLL. Now, I have to admit, when I first read this in our research, my immediate reaction was, great, another massive piece of international bureaucracy.
That's a fair reaction.
Right. Like, do we really need a whole new global protocol for this? Is this a new law?
We do need it, but no, TLL isn't a new law or a governing body. You can think of it more like an API Rosetta Stone or a universal power adapter for data.
Okay, I like that analogy.
The source documents provide this excellent summary of how the global system is supposed to work. It notes, ISO identifies the territory, WIPO licenses the intellectual property, VAT taxes the transaction, UPU delivers the physical mail, and TLL orchestrates all of them.
Orchestrates. Okay, let's look at the mechanics of that orchestration. Right now, a platform like Shopify is trying to guess how to combine ISO codes and VAT rules. Does TLL just sit in the middle and translate?
Yeah, it acts as the middleware. It translates between the EU rules, the ISO standards, the e-commerce platform logic, and the logistics routing.
So it's basically doing the context work that humans used to do.
Exactly. And the sources detail a proposed 4-step pilot program for Åland to actually prove this out.
It's essentially reverse engineering the system collapse we just talked about. Step 1 is fixing the root data. You go to the foundational global address databases, like Loquate and GeoPostcodes, and you define the AX code correctly. Because if that root API call returns the correct geographical and legal status, everything downstream improves.
Spot on. And then step 2 takes that clean data to the major e-commerce platforms. You finally activate Åland as a distinct delivery region with standardized logic.
So no more "we don't deliver here" error messages.
Exactly. Then step 3 tackles that awful double taxation. You update the payment systems, the APIs for Klarna, Stripe, PayPal, to automatically implement a 0% VAT charge at checkout for the AX region.
Because it correctly classifies the transaction as an export.
Right. And finally, step 4 fixes the logistics. You enforce direct routing in the shipping APIs.
So instead of sending packages on a convoluted loop through mainland Finland just because the computer thinks it's a domestic Finnish delivery,
The TLL logic actually instructs the system to route it directly to Åland as an export. It saves time, it saves money, and it cuts massive amounts of unnecessary carbon emissions.
Okay, so this is huge for physical boxes. But if this bad code is breaking physical shipments, what is it doing to digital goods that don't even have a box?
Oh, that's where things get really deep.
Because our sources make it super clear that TLL is not just about e-commerce and logistics. It also focuses heavily on digital rights and language, right?
Yes. This is perhaps the most profound impact of TLL. The framework includes specific components called the language and cultural profile and the rights region.
Think about a streaming service like Netflix or regional public broadcasters like SVT Play in Sweden. Their intellectual property rights, those WIPO licenses, they are rigidly tied to geography.
They are. And if the global databases are confused about your geography, your digital streaming services just break.
Wow.
In the case of Åland, their native language and cultural connection is deeply tied to Sweden. But legally, their governing state is Finland.
So without TLL, a streaming service queries its database, sees Finland governing state, and just automatically serves up a Finnish language content catalog. And that is completely useless if you primarily speak Swedish and rely on that for your news and cultural programming. It's a huge issue for areas lacking digital services in their own language.
The TLL protocol actually solves this by separating the governing state from the content profile.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it's a specific data layer that tells the streaming service, yes, the legal and tax responsibility belongs to Finland, but the rights region and the content profile must be mapped to the Swedish language catalog.
It effectively digitizes the human reality of place, not just the political lines on a map. It ensures that entire communities aren't, like, digitally starved of their own language and culture just because an API couldn't handle the nuance.
If you zoom out, TLL is actually proposing a digital framework for cultural preservation.
That's a great way to put it.
It allows global tech platforms to serve localized, native language digital services to minority regions completely automatically. The platform doesn't have to manually negotiate custom back-end logic for every single island or autonomous zone.
The TLO protocol does all the heavy lifting for them.
Exactly.
But realistically, creating a massive global API middleware is a huge undertaking. Are tech giants really going to adopt a new protocol just to fix shipping and streaming for one small group of islands?
Well, that is the crucial reveal in the source material. Åland is merely the test bed. TLL is not an Åland protocol. It is a global standard being built for edge cases everywhere.
Because there are a lot of cows on a lot of ice out there.
There really are. The sources list over 50 areas globally that suffer from this exact kind of digital exclusion.
Wow, 50.
Yeah, we are talking about the Faroe Islands, the Canary Islands, Northern Ireland, Monaco, San Marino, Helgoland, Mount Athos, Madeira.
That's a lot of people.
That list represents millions of consumers and tens of thousands of small businesses.
Walk me through how TLL applies to a place like the Canary Islands. Are they facing the exact same API failures as Åland?
The symptoms are exactly the same, even if the underlying legal nuance is a bit different. The Canary Islands are legally part of Spain, but they are outside the standard EU VAT area. They have their own special tax regime called IGAC.
So let me guess, a generic checkout system sees Spain and applies the standard Spanish VAT.
Yep, it slaps on the 21% Spanish VAT, completely ignoring the local IGAC rules. TLL maps that out perfectly. The same middleware structure that separates Åland from Finland separates the Canary Islands from standard Spanish tax logic.
What about a really highly complex geopolitical situation like Northern Ireland post-Brexit? I mean, that has to be a nightmare for code.
Oh, it is. And that is exactly where a protocol like TLL becomes absolutely essential. Northern Ireland has a dual status. It is part of the UK customs territory, but it also aligns with certain EU single market rules for goods.
Trying to hard code that into a million individual Shopify stores is just impossible.
It really is. But if TLL sits in the middle as the orchestrator, it can seamlessly route the correct regulatory data to whatever checkout cart is querying it.
There is a really fascinating historical parallel brought up in our source material that I want to touch on. It's a quote from Mats Adamczak, the chair of the entrepreneurs in Åland.
Yeah, that's a great point he makes.
And I just want to add a quick disclaimer here for you listening. To be clear, we are just impartially reporting on how the source material frames this. We're not taking any political stance on historical events or endorsing any specific viewpoints, but Adamczak draws a really interesting structural comparison.
It's definitely a striking way to look at the evolution of geopolitics versus digital politics.
Right. He notes that in the early 1900s, there was a major geopolitical crisis known as the Åland question.
Yes.
And the international community solved it through a totally unique political model of autonomy, which avoided the violent divisions that tragically occurred in places like Cyprus or Ireland. They innovated a completely new kind of political structure just to handle an edge case.
And Adamczak looks at this current digital exclusion and basically calls it the Åland Question 2.0.
Yeah. He sees this not as a burden, but as an opportunity to turn a unique exception into a global standard.
Exactly.
Just as they modeled political autonomy a century ago, they can now use TLL to model how digital and analog trade should seamlessly connect for the entire world.
It's really about establishing a blueprint. If they pilot TLL successfully, Åland doesn't just get its packages delivered on time. It positions itself as the global reference model for digital trade orchestration.
They become the gateway that teaches the rest of the world how to handle digital exceptions.
Exactly.
Think about what this means for someone living in one of these 50-plus territories. They spend their entire lives constantly navigating digital roadblocks, having to trick checkout carts, paying double taxes, or being geo-blocked from their own native language media.
They must be exhausted.
To finally see a structural architectural map that actually acknowledges their existence must be incredibly validating.
It shifts the burden from the individual back to the system. The technology is finally being redesigned to integrate local realities, rather than forcing local realities to assimilate into a rigid drop-down menu.
So to summarize our journey today, we started out looking at a cow on the ice, a broken checkout cart, a missing MRN code halting a physical truck, and a zip code triggering double taxation.
And we discovered that the future of global e-commerce, and honestly, digital rights, won't be secured by passing new international laws.
No, it will be secured by designing better digital translation layers.
Middleware, like the territorial logic layer, acts as that universal adapter, orchestrating our increasingly automated systems so that physical laws and digital code finally shake hands.
It's such a vital fix for any region facing digital exceptions or lacking services in their language.
A it is. And this raises a fundamental question, and it is the thought I want to leave you, the listener, to really mull over today.
Go for it.
We spend an immense amount of our political energy debating physical borders. We argue over tariffs, border walls, and passport control. But what happens when the most impenetrable borders of the 21st century are actually just misconfigured lines of code in a database?
Wow.
I mean, if an API doesn't validate your territory or an algorithm completely blocks the digital services of your native language, do you truly have access to the modern world? The physical roads might be wide open, but if the digital gates are locked, you are effectively isolated.
We have to make sure the digital ice holds for everyone. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
The next time you click Buy Now or start streaming a show, take a closer look at the invisible infrastructure executing those API calls behind the screen. There's a whole world of orchestration happening right beneath the surface.